Biliyor musun? Erken rezervasyon başladı. Yazın en renkli fırsatları cyprusparadise.com'da. %40, %50 hatta %60'a varan kaçırılmaz indirimler. Erken rezervasyon yap, uçak bileti fiyatına paket tatili al. Uygun fiyata Kıbrıs tatilinin adresi cyprusparadise.com. Zaman akıp gitmeden acele edin. Bir bakmışsınız yaz gelmiş. Cyprus Paradise. Tatiliniz bizimle güvende.
Kalitenin, güvenin, hızlı teslimatın adresi Ancon Furniture. Ancon Furniture ailesi olarak yeni ürünler ile hizmete devam etmekteyiz. Yeni model koltuk takımlarımız, yatak mekanizmaları bir dokunuş ile açılıp bir dokunuş ile kapanabilmektedir. Bir dokunuş ile açtığımız yatak mekanizmasının yatak çarşafı kullanıma hazır, serili olarak içinden çıkmaktadır. Yıl sonuna kadar herhangi bir koltuk takımı alan her müşterimize akıllı sehpa hediyemizdir. En iyi ürün, en iyi fiyat. Sadece Ancon Furniture'da. Bize uğramadan karar vermeyin. En iyisini biz yapana kadar daha iyisi yok.
Welcome to the latest printed press. I'm very happy today to have a COVID-19 special again with Prof.Dr.Ian Hale. Welcome, Dr. Hale. And also you are a member of the World Academy of Medical Science. So I wanted to add that to your title tonight, as it's very important for our viewers to know. How are we today?
Oh, hopefully good, although there's been a tremendous storm earlier on in the day, and I wondered whether we were going to be able to do this, but at the moment it's calmed down nicely. So yes, it was very spectacular. Temperature dropped by 10 degrees Celsius in 10 minutes, yes, followed by an extraordinary bucket full of rain.
Yes, just to let our viewers know, where are you currently? What country?
In Spain. I'm about 20 kilometers from Alicante.
Oh, lovely, lovely.
Ironically, where the CRISPR genetic engineering technique was discovered in the University of Alicante.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. Obviously, thank you very much again for coming on my program.
Thank you for inviting me, and I'd like to say hello to all our viewers.
Yes, and we've got quite a few logging on already. And like I said, it's a real honor to have you on our program to be giving us the wealth of information that you have. And we're going to be going into a little bit about your background and, you know, how you came about to writing your book. But first of all, can we talk about some of the extra explanations and more information in detail that you're going to be adding to your book? And if we could just have a bit of a brief explanation of that to our viewers.
Yes, well, the book as it stands, as you can buy it today, is fine, and it will covers everything everyone needs to know. But what I've done in what I hope to be in what I hope will be the next edition, which is it's not an update, it's it's a way of, it shows in a much more micro level how to manage the epidemic in each country, and indeed the pandemic globally, and what needs to be done in the future, which is again in the book you can buy today, to prevent pandemics ever happening again. So really it's just a question of more examples of where my protocols have worked in the past. So it's really just as I say, it's just more detailed. It's no different in terms of the advice given. No, I've not retracted anything. And where my suggestions have been tried, they've been done so with great success. Where they haven't, disaster has struck.
I mean, if we talk about this second lockdown that we've been in, we're coming out of it the 2nd of December. In our last program, you did say that you thought that was a disastrous idea. Do you still stick to that opinion? And
Absolutely.
do you think it's a good idea to come out of the lockdown?
Done in the right way, yes. Lockdowns produce a huge number of problems. They actually cause far more problems than they solve. First of all, the psychological pressure of being locked down, is a well-known cause of mental illness. It increases alcoholism, drug abuse, the instance of domestic violence during lockdown. In every country it's been done, has increased by 90%. Suicide rates have increased by 40%. If anybody thinks that a lockdown is the answer, then they are surely asking the wrong question. The other problem with lockdowns is that they concentrate people in confined spaces, often their own homes. If the germ gets in, everybody gets it. If everybody gets it, it mixes together, and that is a very good way of making the virus, or indeed any other type of infective agent, mutate quicker and potentially cause a far stronger and a far more dangerous strain to emerge at some point. Lockdowns are not the answer. They're absolutely the opposite, as well as wrecking the economy, of course, and the whole, systems that support society.
So what would you suggest in its place?
Well, the suggestion that I've put in the book, that targeted, basically what we need to do, and I've explained this in much greater detail in the book. Basically, we need mass testing. That needs to be continuous. And where infection, and we can monitor infection by monitoring wastewater, water from the from bathrooms will contain the virus, and you can work out the percentage level of viral load in any one particular place by analysing what goes into the sewage farm, and that's been done successfully, as I've advised. On top of that, by doing that, not only can you immediately tell where hotspots of infection are, you can close them off, but without changing everyday life within the quarantined area. Quarantine, I'm in favor of. Lockdown, I'm not. If you cut places off, you can supply them by road, going through a disinfecting machine before that looks like a big car wash, and they're very easy and portable. Or you can simply drop all the supplies they need by helicopter, depending on the size of the outbreak. Allow people to get out into the fresh air. Allow them to mix with other people, providing they obviously use sanitizer and mask and the other very good advice that the government has given. There's no reason daily life should not go on. Even sporting events can continue with certain restrictions and guidelines as well. So it disrupts people's lives to a minimum. It disrupts the economy to a minimum. but it also prevents the virus from mutating so quickly, and it stops the virus spreading out into greater areas, and therefore you reduce an epidemic in a particular country to a series of infected hotspots, which you can then target your treatment and medical staff for in order to take care. If the protocols followed in my book were adopted immediately, any country could end this pandemic within weeks and get back to something like a reasonable situation, both politically, socially, clinically, and economically.
And you said that
and that's why people should read the book.
Yeah, I know. Well, this is it. What do you think about the vaccinations and what's happening with that?
Well, vaccination is potentially a very powerful tool, and the absolutely revolutionary way that Pfizer and Moderna and Oxford University AstraZeneca have developed their vaccines. The potential for the future, and I've put this in the book. They could have been, bearing in mind this will be a program. We're not going to be able to vaccinate everybody, within the next X time, and I'll explain in a minute. But by the time these have been developed more fully to vaccinate against other conditions, and they will be, we will achieve more over the next. I mean, they've already been researching it for a year. We will achieve more in the following 4 years. In other words, a 5-year block. They will advance medical science by at least half a century, and the potential they open up using the genetic messenger RNA technique is well, it's extremely exciting, and it's one of the hopes that I pinpoint in the book.
Okay.
So if things are done properly, the world can emerge a much stronger and much more robust situation than the situation was that allowed what is not a particularly dangerous virus to become a threat to the very foundations of our societies around the world. One has only to look at the horrific figures coming out of the USA every day to see what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a very good question here, which sort of interests me as well. And I'm sure you'll be able to explain it to us. Why was we never ready for this pandemic in the first place? Is it not a natural part of science? Why did we not feel prepared? Because it felt like it crept up on us a little bit.
Yes, but it wasn't the case at all. The WHO first issued a warning to governments of the potential that a coronavirus could emerge.
Yes.
Because there are 7 coronaviruses already which infect human beings, and they normally cause somewhere between a mild sniffle and a nasty cold for a week. They're perfectly natural. They've been around for a lot longer than we have, but in the early part, I'm not sure which month of 2005, the WHO, through a long-standing research program, which is continuous and which continues to this day, identified the potential of a coronavirus evolving in a certain manner. And this is what happened in this case. I've spent a lot of time staring down electron microscopes. And actually watching the virus evolve over a period of time. And I've described exactly how this virus came into being and what it is and what it isn't. That piece of research from the WHO was distributed to major governments around the world. And President George W. Bush in America did something that only 2 presidents in history have done before. He made a speech before the whole of Congress. Normally, a president would not do that. They might address the leaders of the House or the Senate in the Oval Office, but to address Congress as a whole, warning precisely of what has happened. So we had 14 years warning to monitor coronaviruses, to develop treatments against them. We had the warning that SARS, which is a coronavirus,
Yes.
and MERS, which is a coronavirus,
Yeah.
and the fact that they only affected people somewhere else led to an extraordinary complacency through the Western world, and the prediction that President Bush and that the WHO made in 2005 about exactly the situation we're seeing today was ignored.
Yeah.
And we've slept walk into disaster.
Why do you think it was ignored? Because that's quite a tremendous thing. I'm going to be looking up that speech, actually. That's very interesting. I mean, that was a great forewarning, and yet it was ignored. What's the reason behind it, do you think?
Because it didn't affect so-called developed countries very much, and therefore medical science didn't take the notice it should have done. You know, it was at least subconsciously regarded as something that happens over there. It can't happen here. It was sheer arrogance, and the medical establishment, as it stands, well, when this is over, then there needs to be investigation, inquiry, and considerable sanction against many members and sections of the medical community and the medical science community. This was a disaster that could have been averted, and that still can be minimized.
Yes.
I mean, the fact that that medical scientists are still even talking about lockdown as an option just proves the absolute futility of much of the thinking of the medical establishment. I mean, lockdowns have been tried in numerous countries, and they have failed every time. Now, one of the definitions of insanity is to repeat the same actions, expecting a different result. And it seems to me that the medical establishment has made itself virtually redundant. That's really the reason I wrote the book, because I wanted to present cogent and realistic and evidenced alternatives, both in terms of treatment and in terms of containment and defeat of this plague, and how we prepare to prevent these things in the future. So the book is in those 4 sections, essentially.
I mean, the future, but really, first of all, what I like about the book, actually, the parts that I've read, is the fact that you actually give personal advice to people who aren't, you know, scientifically knowledgeable. And I do feel that it's explained in a very simple way, although it's a very complicated thing, obviously.
Yeah.
A huge experience of being able to actually access this and be able to explain it. And it's not just your science background, but your historical background as well, I think has helped you sort of research past pandemics and plagues and things to see patterns. And I always say, you can't go by what somebody says or what somebody does, but you can always see what a true person's intentions are through the patterns. And I guess that is the same with science. But I do think it's very accessible and very good for a person to personally be able to look at it and individually be able to, you know, think about what they're eating, what they need to do personally to be able to prevent from getting, you know, the virus, hopefully. We've got another question here. Humans best beat everything. Oh, it's from Abby Hussein. Humans beat everything thrown at them and they will beat this virus as well. Do you think that there is still hope, Dr. Ian?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the title of the book is Surviving Corona: Facts, Fakery, and Hope for the Future. Yes, we certainly can beat this. But the longer we delay going about beating it the right way, then you know, the more the death toll is going to mount, and it's as simple as that. And it's, of course, it's not just about the death toll. I mean, tragic and, you know, and terrible though it is, but like all viruses, and this virus is no really different from any other. Like all viruses, even people who recover are always left with after effects. Sometimes they go away after a few weeks, but some people are left permanently disabled to a greater or lesser degree. And of course, it can re-emerge. The classic case is chicken pox. You get chicken pox when you're a kid. You know, most kids do. 50 years down the line, you get a cold, which obviously we hope stimulates the immune system, which wakes up the incipient virus from the chicken pox. Suddenly you've got shingles, and then you've got a life-threatening combination. And 30, 40 years down the line, we may find the same thing with COVID-19. And I have covered that eventuality as part of the advice and protocols set out in the book.
Yes.
What needs to be done?
We can't change what the government decides, unfortunately. We have to sort of go along with whatever it is that the governments decide. I mean, obviously, it's quite a travesty that these warnings were given to governments and, you know, they were ignored. But on an individual basis, obviously, everybody should read the book. But just as a summary, what advice would you give normal members of the public, you know, because obviously if we do go into a lockdown, we have no control over that. It will be a government decision. What individual advice would you give people for everyday life?
Well, firstly, if I can go back to your first point, I certainly don't blame governments for this, because governments change every 4 or 5 years. The warning should have been heeded by the medical science establishment and by the medical profession itself. Ministers and governments can only work on the advice they're given. If they're not given advice, or the advice is faulty, it's not fair to blame any government for this. It really is not. My advice, well, I mean, there are a lot of things you can do, and I've set out a lot of them in the book. And I don't have time, obviously, now to put them all down. But people really must wear decent masks all the time. And it's my opinion that masking in public, you know, should be mandatory, as it is in many countries. Secondly, it's very important that people get plenty of sleep and that they keep well hydrated. I recommend particularly, and I know people can be, I mean, particularly now, are on very, very small budgets and are in a lot of trouble financially, which of course affects their physical health through stress, and their mental health. And this is an issue that needs to be addressed. And again, in the book, I point that out. So yeah, plenty of rest. Keep well hydrated, but not overhydrated. Eat a good balanced diet. If anyone is overweight, then that's one of the primary risk factors of death. Treating obesity would reduce the death toll by a vast amount. I recommend people supplement with small doses of zinc, and also with vitamin D3, which is actually very misnamed. Vitamin D3 is actually a hormone, but when it was discovered in 1906, they didn't realize it was a hormone. Since then we realized that it is. So yeah, it's a form of hormone supplementation, hormone replacement therapy, if you like. So yeah, those are the two major ones. I know people like to use vitamin C, and that's a good idea. And the other one I would add as the most basic protocol is omega-3 fish oil. That's not cheap, but a cheap alternative is a spoonful of cod liver oil a day. revolting though I know that is from childhood experience.
Be given to children when they were ill back in Victorian times, isn't that correct? I don't know if that's correct. You're the historian here, so you would know better than
No, that's first. My mother was one of the most senior naval nursing officers in the UK,
Wow.
as well as being the senior sister at the John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford. Yeah, during the winter, she dosed me every day with a spoonful of cod liver oil. So that's not well. I guess now that kind of is historical, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, we've got some more comments coming in. Abby Hussain has said, does Dr. Ian Hale agree that the coronavirus attacks the least healthy and most vulnerable people of our society?
Absolutely, and it's those people we should concentrate on and vaccinate first, along with medical staff and care home workers and residents, obviously, and people in close contact with the public, in other words, or people who are in confined spaces. And I explain the reason for that in great detail in the book. Again, there's not time, but I've discovered something about this virus that no one else has. And if people take my advice, it will massively reduce their risk of getting it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it'll reduce their risk of getting it. So yes, Mr. Hussain is exactly right. I mean, the major danger factor is, first of all, being male.
Okay.
There's a reason for that, and again, that's in the book. Secondly, having type A blood group. Thirdly, being overweight, even a bit overweight, let alone very overweight. And fourthly, people with diabetes are very highly at risk. So, and the fifth and final one is people with a compromised immune system. Normally, that would be due to being older. So those are the groups we need to concentrate vaccination on: public service workers, medical staff, obviously, and the vulnerable members of society that Mr. Hussain mentions.
Yes. Right, we've got lots and lots of questions coming in now, Dr. Hale. The next one is, what is a decent mask? Do you agree that some people with health issues should be excused from wearing masks?
No, quite the opposite. People with health issues are much more vulnerable, as Mr. Hussain pointed out. There are a lot of different types of masks to choose from. The important thing is to make sure that the mask you buy is a genuine one, because there are an awful lot of fake masks out there on the internet. It's horrifying. You've got to be sure of the source. It must have the European CE standard mark on it, and that's followed by a number. It's important to check that number on the internet to make sure it's a genuine one and not a fake. Secondly, any FDA approved mask or any ISO approved mask, and again, look the numbers up and be sure of where from where you got them. But a good quality mask of any nature, whether it's an N95 or a triple ply surgeon's mask, this is one of the most fundamental and vital weapons we have against this pandemic. So my advice to people with health issues would be to wear the finest quality mask they can get, to wear N95s.
Okay, that's very sound advice. We've got McKenna.
I've also put in the book a suggestion, one that is actually thousands of years old, that nobody's picked up on how to make a more effective mask than a standard cotton surgical or even surgical mask. That there's a better way of doing it, and a cheaper way of doing it as well. Okay. It's all about the right material, and they're not using it.
Okay, so again, another reason to read the book. Michaela's put magnesium helps vitamin C and D. She's also put we will get our vaccines this week. She's also put you're the best, Professor Hale. I know that you're very good colleagues and you've worked together for many years.
Yes, we have and do.
And also BAME, she's put, oh, and we've got another question from Erin. He's put, I have a question. How does government restrictions help us overcome COVID? Well, we sort of covered this, but, or does it?
Well, yes, certain restrictions are necessary. I mean, for example, if we allow the traditional public Christmas gatherings, Hanukkah gatherings, you know, the winter holidays, and the traditional crowds at parties for New Year's Eve, then we'll turn the country into a slaughterhouse. We simply cannot allow these massive infected events, even if people wear masks. And the fact is that not everyone would do. It would be unrealistic.
Yes.
You know, we cannot afford to do that, and I'll explain why. The vaccine is very effective. I mean, the 4 that Cuba have developed, the Sputnik 5 that Russia have developed, the 2 that China have developed, the Moderna and the Pfizer one from the USA, and the AstraZeneca, Oxford University. I mean, these are very effective vaccines.
Yes.
The problem with the 2 American ones is storing them. The Pfizer vaccine becomes useless if it rises above a temperature of minus 67 degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
And it's best stored at between minus 80 and minus 100 degrees Celsius. Moderna's vaccine has to be stored at below minus 20 Celsius, whereas the fantastic advantage that the Oxford AstraZeneca one has is that it can be stored between +3 and 20. So you can just store it in a domestic fridge, which you can't do with any of the others.
Other ones, okay.
The other thing is the vaccination is a program. You have a vaccination. You have to wait 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And that was a protocol I devised in my book on autism, the 3-week gap between vaccinations.
Yes.
And then you have to go back for the second one. And it's not until 28 days at least after the second one that you are fully protected. And one of my concerns about the vaccines are that people might have the first shot and think, yeah, I'm okay, I'm fine, I'm protected.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's a 2-month process.
Okay.
And those 2 months over the winter, unless we show the discipline and avoid gatherings and take the rest of the advice in the book, as I said, they'll turn America and Western Europe into a slaughterhouse.
Michaela's also put, we know that good ventilation helps, especially if gathering over the festive period. Abby Hussein has also put, our community suffers from type 2 diabetes proportionally more than other ethnic minorities. Well, I think certain ethnic minorities have been, suffering with the COVID-19 more so than others, I suppose, for that reason.
Well, yeah, but also because ethnic minorities tend to be crowded into overcrowded housing space. That they often have limited access to medical attention. Often also, that they're people who can't afford the things that should have been given out free right at the beginning. So I think that the problem that a lot of the problem that the ethnic minorities and other minorities around the world are facing is not anything genetic that makes them more susceptible to the coronavirus. The coronavirus doesn't care what race you are. All it wants to do is kill you. And it wants to do it slowly and very, very unpleasantly. And I want to emphasize that. This is not a nice or quick death, what it does. I mean, not there's any such thing, but this is terrible, and I've seen it. And that was, again, one of the major reasons I wrote the book.
But
But in order to properly address and to conquer this disease,
yes,
we have to tackle the social and economic inequalities in the world. And Dr. McKellar Yassil is absolutely right, as she always is, that one of the things is access to well-ventilated, clean air.
yeah,
And when people are crowded together, you know, and you know, minorities are the most likely victims.
mm,
They're not going to have either. So in places like that, there need to be proper aircraft standard air purifiers,
yeah,
and they don't need to be living in pollution. That's another very good reason why people should wear masks. I mean, not only does it cut your risk of infection,
yeah,
but for people with allergies and people who live in polluted cities, you know, it's going to improve their general health and make them more robust and more likely to survive the virus if they get it.
yeah. Very good
And
point.
there's a million other reasons why they should do it as well.
Of course. We've got more comments. Ellen said, apologies, I've just joined, but hopefully we've covered the points needed for Ellen. Thank you very much for joining our program. Naima Calais has put, thank you for very valuable information. Obviously, what you're telling us is extremely valuable, and I definitely recommend that people read the book. Michaela has also put, social distancing precautions are valid reasons. Gatherings and cuddling are not good, which is a shame, of course. But currently, I think we need to refrain from these things.
Yes, she's absolutely right. Social distancing. I mean, it was Dr. McKellar's research that showed that this virus can be airborne when everybody else was saying it wasn't, and she was exactly right, and that's gone into the book, and her immense contribution to it is fully acknowledged in the introduction.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, if Dr. Yesel should be on a corporation or a major government panel. And being one of the people who's leading this fight. So yeah, it's very important, as I say, and again that often goes down to socioeconomic issues. People don't have access to good ventilation and clean air, and you know, if you live in a very crowded block, for example, in parts of New York that I know, social distancing is impossible.
Yes.
But she's absolutely right. Yeah, social distancing and avoiding kissing, cuddling, shaking hands, anything that can transfer bodily fluids, skin to skin contact. Yeah, absolutely. If her advice were taken, that would reduce infection rates just on its own.
Just on its own. Good. Neil has also put another comment. Are we going into another lockdown after Christmas? What does Dr. Hale think of this?
Well, I'm not party to what the government thinking is, so I can't answer that question. But what I can say is that if the guidelines that I've set out aren't followed,
yes,
and that we've discussed about the parties and everything and the normal festivities,
yes,
it's just too terrifying. Lockdown won't be Well,
Right.
it won't be a solution. It won't even be an option because there won't be enough people even to enforce it or to feed the people who are locked down. I mean, it'll be that bad.
Yes.
I mean, I've worked out the kind of figures we could be looking at in various different countries in terms of deaths and and chronic disability. I'm not going to repeat those figures, and I'm not in the book, but believe me, they are terrifying. And the method I've used has not failed yet.
Mm.
I don't compute a model. I use extraction analysis from big data.
Yeah, so really we've got to take heed and definitely read the book. Becca has also put the antibody vaccine will be at our best survival. And we are seeing the aftermath now, long COVID, taste, smell.
Yes, but unfortunately, COVID can leave people with. She's absolutely right about both. The antibody treatment, what called MCAs,
Yes.
is one of the treatments that President Trump had when he caught COVID, and
Mm.
as you know, he was fully recovered within 2 weeks.
Yes.
And I think that's in the book as well,
Yeah.
and what MCAs are. And I know that Dr. McKelly Yessel knows what MCAs are as well. Yeah, and antibodies. My advice about antibody treatment is set down in great detail in the book, and what needs to be done both on a national and an international basis.
Yeah. I mean,
The thing is, at this point in time, it's been allowed to go on now for nearly, well, the first death from COVID
yeah.
was confirmed as being the 26th of July 2019 in San Francisco. So we've had nearly 18 months of this.
Mm.
Time has gone by, and at this point, there is so little time. We've got at best 65 days to save our societies.
Yeah, which is quite scary, really, when you say it like that. But there is still hope.
Would people prefer the harsh truth, or would they prefer a comfortable lie and sleepwalk to their graves?
Mm. Dr. Abi Hussein has also put, Dr. Ian Hale, which is sort of swiftly moves me to this point. Could you please mention common sense as well as the precaution against the virus? What do we think about that?
Yes, it seems to me that common sense is nothing like as common as it used to be. I mean, it's common sense to wear a mask. It's common sense to sanitize your hands, or just wash your hands in soap and water. This virus is not a tough guy. Just soap and water, and it's dead. So yeah, and don't. I'm not going to say what I was thinking there, but yeah, I mean there are things, try when you go shopping in supermarkets, try to avoid popular times so that there are the minimum number of people there. That's common sense.
Yeah.
Plan your week so that you limit your exposure as much as possible.
Mm.
Don't dine inside. Don't go drinking inside bars if you're allowed to. I know Britain have done the right thing and more or less closed that.
Yes.
And that needs to happen. Dance halls, bars, indoor restaurants. I mean, these schools, these are the absolute breeding grounds of spiking infection.
Yeah. Well,
sadly, we've seen the same thing again with universities. You've got a lot of people crowded into big blocks often. If you take some of the big campus universities, you've had students behaving, to say irresponsibly, for people of the intelligence required to get into university. It's hard. It really is hard for me to understand, how they could have been so stupid.
Yeah, I think people just don't actually realise the magnitude of this. But we've actually gone over. We've gone over by 15 minutes, but I did feel like we need to. Lasting messages. Obviously, I think Dr. Ian Hale, we will call you again in the next few weeks. But for now, what's your lasting sort of message to our audiences? Is number one, get the book to get the right advice. But anything else you'd like to add to that?
Keep your distance, as Dr. Yessel said. Avoid crowds. Treat everyone as if they're the person who's going to infect you.
Which is quite sad, isn't it? But that's the harsh reality currently with the numbers.
It is. These pandemics occur approximately once every 100 years.
Yes.
We should have learned from the ones of the past. It seems that we haven't. But if we're to survive, I'm afraid some sacrifices are going to be needed, and people are going to have to put away their selfishness.
Yes.
And they're going to, the biggest message I want to give here is that when the WHO issued their global health warning on January the 3rd, 2020, from that point onwards, the world we knew has gone. It's not coming back. There's not going to be a return to normal. That world is dead. Forget it and don't live in denial. We've now entered a new phase of development. And as I said, with the development of these genetic vaccines, this could become a golden age for medicine and good health if we take this opportunity and get it right.
Okay. So actually a glimmer of hope there. In the doom and gloom, there is some hope for the future.
Yeah, and there's more in the book too.
Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Ian Hale, for coming on my program. Thank you very much to the audiences out there for the comments. Please, watch the program over. I'll be putting the links to Dr. Ian Hale's book and read it, please. But that's it from Eurogames TV for tonight. Hopefully everybody has a good evening. Goodbye, Dr. Ian Hale. Goodbye.
Thank you, and take care.
And you. Thank you. Goodbye.
Biliyor musun? Erken rezervasyon başladı. Yazın en renkli fırsatları cyprusparadise.com'da. %40, %50 hatta %60'a varan kaçırılmaz indirimler. Erken rezervasyon yap, uçak bileti fiyatına paket tatili al. Uygun fiyata Kıbrıs tatilinin adresi cyprusparadise.com. Zaman akıp gitmeden acele edin. Bir bakmışsınız yaz gelmiş. Cyprus Paradise. Tatiliniz bizimle güvende.
Kalitenin, güvenin, hızlı teslimatın adresi Ancon Furniture. Ancon Furniture ailesi olarak yeni ürünler ile hizmete devam etmekteyiz. Yeni model koltuk takımlarımız, yatak mekanizmaları bir dokunuş ile açılıp bir dokunuş ile kapanabilmektedir. Bir dokunuş ile açtığımız yatak mekanizmasının yatak çarşafı kullanıma hazır, serili olarak içinden çıkmaktadır. Yıl sonuna kadar herhangi bir koltuk takımı alan her müşterimize akıllı sehpa hediyemizdir. En iyi ürün, en iyi fiyat. Sadece Ancon Furniture'da. Bize uğramadan karar vermeyin. En iyisini biz yapana kadar daha iyisi yok.